We had a collaboration with some Chinese scientists. Here we have a vaccine. What is the problem? Get over it.
Now, if we do a really great job on new vaccines, healthcare, reproductive health services, we could lower that by perhaps 10 or 15%.
I hope that it can occur in a civil way. I mean civil in a special way, peaceful.
The biggest question, maybe in economics and politics of the coming decades, will be what to do with all these useless people.
And as things stand, the world remains unprepared for the next disease X and the next pandemic.
And for scientists, it is unequivocal. Humans are to blame. The era of global warming has ended. The era of global boiling has arrived.
We are 5 years, 8 months, and 2 days into 14 days to flatten the curve. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Johnny Anderson. I'm joined today by Jeff Nyquist from jrnyquist.blog and Jimmy from Brooklyn. Unfortunately, Trevor is not with us again this week. He had a small emergency. Don't want to get into any of the details, but he did assure me that he will be here next week to get back into the mix of things, and we're all excited about that. Jimmy, how are you?
Oh, very interested in what's happening now.
As am I, and as are a lot of
people. You got a new mayor, Jimmy.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Yeah, you've got a new mayor, a nice conservative-minded mayor.
A conservative Stalinist.
Yes. It's the one that they didn't sing the Internationale.
Yeah, well, they could. He's not mayor yet, so you have to wait for that. So this will probably be the last year you'll have a Christmas tree in Rockefeller Center.
Yeah.
I would assume. Jeff, how are you?
I'm surviving.
You're surviving. All right.
Apologizing to my readers for being so late on this essay, but it's involved so much research, and because I'm just going full blown anti-Hitler because it's really Hitler's becoming the thing now again. It's crazy.
And we were talking before we started that it's really just this push to the extreme right and the extreme left, and it's like you're kind of caught, And somebody told me to ask Trevor at one point in time, and I think this is a great place to start the conversation because we're going to discuss this. And this, I think, given what you're discussing and what the topic of your essay is, I think the scope of it demands the extra time because things keep coming up with it. But somebody asked me once, told me to ask Trevor, and I'm going to ask that question now to the two of you. How do we, as conservatives, right, as true conservatives, people that actually want to conserve something and that believe in traditional conservative values, how do we break through this mantra that's put out there to people? How do we get away from the fact that just because you're an anti-communist, that doesn't make you a fascist? How do you get away from that stigma?
Oh, I did a lot of work with a lot of different groups, people who fled communist countries. I had a big coalition going there. We worked together in protest. I had Cubans and Vietnamese go to protest about Tiananmen Square massacre. I had Chinese and Vietnamese and Ukrainians and Polish go to protest about what's going on in China and Cuba. So it was very interesting. But one thing we found out, when we went to anti-Castro, we went to pro-Castro events, and we were there not to cause trouble, but when you have question and answer, or sometimes in the street, we were able, our crowd, to talk to the opposing crowd. And one thing the communists always push, the word now we hear a lot is binary, non-binary. So in sexual matters, the communists push the idea that it's not a binary thing, that you're either a woman or a man. You have 62 different variations, or whatever maybe is a newer number now, between the men and women. And yet, with the political side, the communists believe if you're not a communist, you're a fascist. They don't allow for anything in the center, anything that's neither communist nor fascist. And my Cuban friend said to the communist side, why do you make communist revolution to topple a fascist government? Why don't you make a democratic revolution? And the communist side didn't know how to answer that because it was a common sense kind of question that people who aren't really immersed and full of all the propaganda over many years, the ordinary radical left cannot answer that. So to a communist, whenever they're taking over a country or attacking somebody in their way, they call them a fascist. So they're binary, I guess the word would be. They're binary on political matters and ideology. You're either fascist or communist. And we know how bad Hitler was. We know how bad fascism is. And people don't know how bad communism is. So communism looked like a solution because the way we're taught history is the communists helped us defeat Hitler. This is why I say it's very important for people to see the documentary, The Soviet Story, where you see the Soviets and the Nazis were actually partners, ideologically, philosophically, in many ways. And so you see that on the sexual thing, there's you don't have to be either a man or a woman. There's all kind of others in there. And yet the political thing, you're either a fascist or a communist. That's how you could tell if people opposing you are communists, because they will call you a fascist like they do with Trump, MAGA, white, heterosexual, Christian men. This is just the state of it now.
Are they all, though, Jimmy? Because what about the person that's just confused and mixed up and just caught up in the hysteria? I'm just trying to, be fair about it here. So what about the ones that call you that but don't understand what they're supporting?
Well, the way, if you could have a discussion with them, some of them you could kind of enlighten, but it's sort of self-reinforcing and self-perpetuating because they're in a crowd, they're in a circle of their friends who are all like-minded, walking around like zombies, plus the media they rely on. They watch ABC, CBS, NBC, they watch, the left-wing talking shows, the left-wing political shows. You see, BBC now is pretty much pushing anti-Western revolution the way they worked against Trump at this latest scandal that was revealed about the BBC. Look, if you and I grew up in France, we would speak French. If we grew up in Germany, we'd be speaking German. So when you're surrounded, when you're immersed in the culture, and that's the thing that communists work on, they get control of the culture. They get control of the means of education, the means of information, and the means of communication. That's why that they could vote hard left and not even realize it, because in their mind, they're voting against fascism, and socialism brings you peace, love, harmony, and no war. So it's a big mind screw. And again, I'm using a clean word there. And it's very effective because since we defeated communism, allegedly, that unleashed the communist forces. It was like an avalanche. And now we see the culmination of it, that a guy could run for office pretty much openly as a Marxist. Obviously, he's a communist. And he got elected mayor. And there's people now all over the country that are rising up. They elected somebody upstate New York, an admitted communist, a Communist Party member. One upstate New York in Ithaca. She's 20 years old. She was supported by the Democratic Socialists of America. It says here in the New York Post, upstate commie elected. Hannah Schvetz, 20, a student organizer and member of the Communist Party USA, was elected to the Ithaca Common Council on Thursday in the Democrat stronghold's 5th Ward, which covers the western half of Cornell University's campus. So this is how they win, and our side doesn't really know how to fight back. Plus, the other side had a head start. They've been doing this for 100 years, and since we were believed we defeated communism, that's what the conservative media celebrities were saying. And meanwhile, now the communist stuff that seemed like the underground is up in your face, in your attacking your kids at school. We're in a mess.
It's easy to live in a civilization where everything has been done for you in advance, the way to think, the way to live. The electricity comes on. You go to school, they teach you. But you see, the thing is that there's a movie called The Edge. Anthony Hopkins plays a billionaire who gets lost in the woods with his friends. And of course, he's a very nice guy. This is a billionaire who's not one of these awful people. And he's got a little survival book, and he reads out of it, and he says, why do people die when they're lost in the woods? They die of shame because they don't know what to do. And see, civilization has given us all these things, but we don't know what to do. There was a failure to transmit the essence of civilization from one generation to another. And now we're lost in the woods. And I think we're at the point of dying of shame because we have turned into a bunch of monkeys. And what is the secret? The secret, it goes back to Socrates, the beginning of our civilization in ancient Greece. Socrates said the unexamined life is not worth living. You have to think. You have to examine. And what makes us different from a monkey? We think. Monkeys don't. They just react. Ortega y Gasset in his Man and People, his anthropological book, he writes at the beginning of the book about the monkey cage. What do you do when you come up to the monkey cage at the zoo and you throw the peanuts in? What do the monkeys do? They're sitting there in the cage. They're looking out at all the people. They're completely vigilant all the time. And when those peanuts go into the cage, they're scurrying about to get those peanuts. They're all focused where? Outward. What is Socrates doing? He's focused inward. And the difference, because Xenophon records, he goes to a dinner party and he's late. The first part of the dialogue, there's no Socrates. Why? He finally shows up and he'd been lost. He was at somebody else's house. Why? Because he was so upset. He was thinking through a problem, he said, right? So he was not the monkey looking around, seeing everything that's going on around him, being attentive to that. He was focused inward thinking, reflecting, examining. This is what Aristotle says. We're rational animals. That's what distinguishes us from monkeys. There's the famous Albert J. Nock, Memoirs of a Superfluous Man, a kind of famous memoir from the first half of the 20th century. And he says, he taught at the Ivy League. And he said, look, I forget what he said, 97, 98% of everybody's a monkey. And that's the people at the Ivy League. Those are the students I taught. They're monkeys. Why are they monkeys? He said, you can educate a human being. You can't educate a monkey. You can train a monkey. And so what are most of the universities and schools forced to doing? They're forced to train because they can't educate them. Why? Because they won't take the step of actually stopping and looking inward. They're all monkeys focused outward, like Ortega y Gasset said at the monkey cage. And right now, we have lost so many human beings. And we are by choice, moral imbeciles, that is monkeys, by choice, because, I don't want to think, it's too hard. Just give it to me. Just give me the short version. Give me the conspiracy. It's
dumb
that
it down
Jews.
Yeah, dumb
right?
it down for me. That's what I get.
Dumb it down for me. So it's socialism's the new religion. Everybody knows there's two iterations of socialism. One is anti-Semitism, National Socialism. The other iteration is dialectical materialism or scientific socialism, Marxism or Marxism-Leninism, or its various denominations. That's what's overwhelming us from both the left and the right. If you want to know what's happening for real, and we are being crushed. I'm watching this happen. There's nothing I can say. I just lose readers. The more I tell the truth, the more I explain this, the more I annoy people. Because it's like, oh no, I don't want to hear that, because some sexy person on TV or on YouTube videos is there with their nifty little, 4-minute blurb that's funny or cute or whatever. And it's the Jews, or it's the capitalists, or it's the insiders, or it's the globalists. No, idiot. It's the new religion with its two different branches, dialectical materialism and National Socialism. And the National Socialists are coming back.
Yeah, I told you before we started, I ran into a person that was giving a talk at a university. Now, they were usually, when you go to these universities, you'll have a lot of left-wing speakers per se. They'll be invited by the campus, the student groups or the faculty or whatever to come in and speak. And the college Republicans, campus Republicans will have speakers come in too on some of these university campuses. Well, something alarming is happening on the university campuses. This person that goes in, gives a speech to the university students. I cannot remember. I wish I could remember which university it was, so I could see if it was even videotaped. But they gave a 90-minute speech. They decided they were going to just allocate 90 minutes, and then they were going to do an hour after that for Q&A for the students. Well, the problem they ran into, they gave the speech for 90 minutes, didn't get any boos or anything for what they were saying. You would expect if someone disagreed or if a crowd disagreed or whatever, there would be a lot of hissing or, banter or ridicule from the crowd. There wasn't any. But afterwards, during the Q&A, all of the questions, now again, mind you, from the Republican student body that invited this person to speak, all the questions that were being asked were about Jews and were about Israel. Again, they allotted an hour for Q&A. They left after 20 minutes because they just couldn't they couldn't stand it anymore, because it was just, they're thinking to themselves, what on earth are all of these questions about? Where's all this coming from? And they just couldn't understand it.
They should have asked the students. The students were asking them questions. Why didn't the people on stage throw it back and ask the students? Why are you people asking these
students aren't even aware enough to even reflect on the origin of their own thoughts.
But the people on the stage should have been aware enough to ask, why are you coming with all these type of questions?
That's
how you find out how the students...
It's so hard, Jimmy, because I've been trying to engage in conversations or debates with anti-Semites and white supremacists. And of course, Eric Voegelin's advice and Olavo de Carvalho's advice is you don't ever engage these people because you can't do anything with them. And there is an extent to which you can. I think there's a nuanced place where some of them are partly aware and you can pull them over, but it's really, I don't see how we stop this, and it's, you can't think about where this comes from. William Sessen, a Dutch journalist and former SS officer who fled to Buenos Aires, Argentina after World War II, made recordings of Adolf Eichmann in 1957. Eichmann, who's also hiding out in Argentina at the time, had been an organizer of the Holocaust, famously, for Reinhard Heydrich, who was the head of the Reich Security Office. In giving these, there was 15 hours of tape that Assassin had done with Eichmann, 700 pages of transcript, by the way, which was used at the Eichmann trial because, what was it, in 1960, the Mossad basically kidnapped Eichmann off the street in Buenos Aires and brought him back to Jerusalem for a trial. And now they're going to, because of this anti-Semitism, they're going to be putting the actual recording, of course, it's in German, of what Eichmann said to Assassin and where he's admitting the whole Holocaust. He's as third down in the line of the order. He's implementing it. He's the guy that made the train schedules to move the Jews to the camps and to round everybody up and probably to fill the orders for Zyklon B, right, that they needed to use to kill the Jews. And so while at his trial, Eichmann defended himself by saying, I was just following orders. Eichmann said, look, I asked Heydrich, where's this coming from? And Heydrich said, the Fuhrer's decided that we are going to liquidate, we're going to kill all the Jews. We're going to eradicate the Jews. And but anyway, in these tapes, to give you an idea of some of the admissions that Eichmann makes in these tapes, he admits to Assassin, he says, Jews who are not fit to work were sent to the final solution, period. And then he added, if we had killed 10.3 million Jews, I would say with satisfaction, good, we destroyed an enemy. Then we would have fulfilled our mission. These were Eichmann's words in 1957, after he'd been sitting out, past a decade after the war. These are real admissions. And most of these people talking about Israel and the Jews, they don't believe in the Holocaust anymore. That generation died. There's no more witnesses. They've all aged out. A few people that are over 100 are left, in their 90s maybe. This is a problem.
It's a very serious problem. The landscape has become so polarized on both ends of it that, I can't, how do I put this? I've lost podcast contributors. You've lost readers. I've lost contributors because of this. I remember asking you, I think it's been a little over a year ago now, or right around that. And I said, are you seeing a rise in anti-Semitism on the right? Because I got accused that I was taking Israeli money and,
Oh, me too.
And
I'm a shill of the Jews.
What?
I've had my picture put on the internet with race traitor over it, over my face.
I'm like,
taking money from the Mossad, right?
Okay. Yeah. I
have no connection to any Jewish organizations whatsoever. None. Never have.
I can't keep with it. I don't understand it. I mean, this is we talked about like the trans stuff, and all that stuff. I said that kind of caught me out of left field. But this anti-Semitism stuff, this has been like an uppercut.
This cuts you out. This catches you out by right field.
Yeah, it's like I'm watching the left hand, and I just got clobbered with the right hand on this one because I wasn't expecting this at all.
Hannah Arendt famously used the phrase banality of evil in describing the Adolf Eichmann in his Jerusalem trial. And today we're seeing this renewal of anti-Semitism, and we have podcasters like Nick Fuentes saying that publicly that Hitler was cool, and these toxic ideas are resurfacing on the right. Also, they're on the left in their form there. But rather than categorizing the new anti-Semites as banality of evil, we might invoke a more precise phrase for this phase of it, the evil of imbecility. This is really imbecilic. This is not the imbecility, by the way, of a congenital idiot or a person of moderate intellectual disability. This is the imbecility of otherwise intelligent individuals who have willfully chosen a path that is less than human. It's irrationalism. And it's a serious matter.
I think some of these people who turn to that crazy path, as you rightfully describe it, in some way they're also victims of propaganda, because this doesn't come out of nowhere. There may be certain people who have slight animosities toward this group or that group over there, or this one versus this one or that one. But when the enemy feeds into the propaganda, whereas you're pointing out, both of you, we have the extreme right and the extreme left, but behind it, it's the same operation, because years ago, the communists openly marched as communists for civil rights, but secretly they were working with the Ku Klux Klan at a very secret, high-level.
Yeah, the communists love to support the Nazis and the KKK under the table. That's their scissor
because
game.
that builds the left, and what the left does builds the right. Yeah. So it's self-perpetuating and self-multiplying. I mean, it's right before our eyes. When you get good people, this is like years ago when you had the mafia real big, right? Like in the 20s and 30s, Hollywood glorified them, the movies and everything, made it exciting. People run home to watch The Sopranos. I knew guys, mafia guys, that would be at a club, we're talking, hanging out, and they're rushing home to see The Sopranos. So real mob guys were going home to watch the TV, to watch The Sopranos. This sounds so damn bizarre, but I've seen it. So the enemy could shape people. I mean, they're shaping massive Americans to hate America. They're shaping the opinion where even parents are having their kids' genitals mutilated. That didn't come out of nowhere. That's part of an overall movement. And when you get both sides fighting each other, remember the Soviets were training Nazi and communists and then sending them into the country of Turkey. So they're bringing neo-Nazis and communists into Turkey to have battles in the street. That creates total chaos. And then the backlash, the government would have to form a real strict government in order to fight back against what's going on, the riots and revolution in the streets. Then that government, being harsh and strong, that will be declared to be a fascist government, and then the communists will organize against fascism. So they exploit existing problems or situations, but sometimes they create the situation and then exploit it. So this is a really big mind screw. Now, there's an article in the New York Post. This is Thursday, November 6th. And the top of the page says Election 2025. And there's an article in here by a guy named Lyle Leibovitz with a V, Leibovitz. He's a Jewish guy. It doesn't say what group he's with, but he's complaining about the Anti-Defamation League. And before that, he complains about the New York City Jewish Community Relations Council of New York. How these groups, like the New York City Council, the New York City Jewish Council Relations supports Mandami, Alexander Ocasio-Cortez. So this is a Jewish group supporting people on the radical left. Now, more conservative type people see this as the Jewish left is dangerous. But this guy's Jewish. He sees what this group is doing is dangerous. They're supporting a group that's against Jews and against Israel. Then he goes down complaining about the Anti-Defamation League is even worse. It says here the group, the ADL, previously one of the most revered Jewish organizations nationwide, spent the last few years turning itself into a full-blown arm of the Democratic Party, releasing reports, for example, that argue that anti-Semitism is a problem exclusively on the right and not, say, on radically progressive college campuses. And it goes on to mention, as one researcher reported in The Tablet magazine last week, even the group's attempt to educate Americans about anti-Semitism are a disaster. People who completed the ADL's anti-Semitism curricula were 15 times more, not less likely to express anti-Semitist and anti-Jewish sentiments after being taught the dangers of anti-Semitism. So we were starting out with people that might be vulnerable or more receptive to the craziness, but then you have an organized moving, pushing and promoting the craziness. When you promote both sides, we could have battles in the streets.
Yes.
Like what the communists were intending to do in Turkey by training neo-Nazis and communists and putting them together into Turkey. So I don't think this comes out of nowhere. This is a highly organized movement going on. This is crazy. This is like if somebody years ago, when you had all the Italian mafia, like today it's kind of died down a bit. Imagine somebody saying, if we kill all the Italians, we'll destroy the mafia. Some people might have thought that about stopping communism by killing the Jews. Yeah. So, but some people think that they think the Jews, there are left-wing Jews, there are centrist Jews, there are right-wing Jews.
Yeah, it's not. They're not a monolithic group.
Exactly. Group.
Yeah,
and yet the Zionists are considered to be fascist because they're nationalists. So they're nationalist Jews. Those are Zionists. So you have Jews in Israel who don't support Israel as a Jewish state. Those are the ones who would try to topple Netanyahu. They'll boo Netanyahu when he was speaking next to Trump. And in this country, you have Jews for Palestine. You have queers for Palestine. I mean,
yeah. Well, Jimmy, when the way I think about this is you have Christian civilization out of which liberalism, classical liberalism, not the communist form of liberalism we have today because it's been poisoned, but classical liberal Christian civilization of the 19th century is being replaced by a new religion / civilization. That is the movement that's underway. And I call it the new religion. It's really socialism. And as I said before, there's two brands. There's anti-Semitism and there's dialectical materialism, the two main denominations or sections. And we must not forget that Karl Marx wrote an anti-Semitic tract on the Jewish question in 1843, in which he argued that modern civil society had a Jewish character. And being a commercial society, it's driven by money, supposedly like Jews, right? This was, and so when you read that essay, you think, am I reading out of Der Stürmer? Am I reading some Nazi rag? This is what it sounds like. It's what's Karl Marx was writing at the time. Now people are, Karl Marx was Jewish, but he was raised as a Lutheran. His Jewish parents, first his mother converted and then his father converted. So they converted to Christianity. So he didn't see himself as Jewish. And so this idea that you see in Karl Marx's essay on the Jewish question was fastened onto in the 1920s as part of Hitler's National Socialism. And it's important to remember that socialism has had in its history these two world-shattering formats. The two big things that have turned the world upside down and caused world wars, dialectical materialism and anti-Semitism. I can't reiterate that enough. With dialectical materialism, you get the Bolsheviks exterminating the bourgeoisie, which are the capitalists, the bankers, the entrepreneurs, the people that own their own businesses. With anti-Semitism, the Jew becomes a metaphor for capitalist bankers and entrepreneurs, with the National Socialists smashing whole countries, aka the Blitzkrieg, incinerating millions in concentration camps. The differences between Bolshevism and National Socialism can be understood as follows, just as Jimmy's analogy about Italians, right? The mafia. With dialectical materialism, all the world's problems are blamed on the bourgeoisie. So line them up against a wall and kill them. With anti-Semitism, all the world's problems are blamed on the Jews. Put them up against a wall and kill all of them. See, both branches of the new religion agree that it's a question of putting people up against the wall and killing them in mass. And it's just a question of what you call them, whether you call them the bourgeoisie or the Jews.
Mm-hmm.
And the Soviet documentary, the Soviet story, shows how they work together. That's so important for people to know that, because that has an impact today on what's going on in Ukraine. Mm-hmm. Just as the Jews know their history of the Holocaust and the Nazis killing them, you have to be crazy to deny that happened.
Well, the Russians are playing both sides of that in Ukraine. That's why they went in there in the first place. Right? Yep. They created that problem in the first place. They created the whole neo-Nazi, quote, neo-Nazi narrative. Zelensky's Jewish. It's ridiculous.
He has converted to Christianity through his wife, I understand. He's an Orthodox Christian.
Oh, has he? Okay. All right.
Yeah. But what's interesting, the Svoboda party in Ukraine, and if you talk to Ukrainians, you're kind of well informed on that party. You could call that the closest to a neo-Nazi, and it's a very small party. I don't think they have any more representatives in the Ukrainian parliament, but that party, and I talked to Ukrainians years ago before the Euromaidan revolution, and they said, "Oh, that's Moscow's agents. That party's controlled by Moscow." And the same thing with the so-called that brigade that supposedly
the Azov Battalion.
The Azov Battalion, which I think became a regiment. The two guys that organized that, they were Russian-speaking, ethnically Russian Ukrainians from Kharkov, or Kharkiv, the Ukrainians call it. That ideology came out of agents from Moscow, if I understand the paper I read on that. And these guys believed it, but the people that they volunteered for that unit, they weren't required to believe in that. And the symbols for the unit weren't Nazi symbols. They were letters of the Ukrainian alphabet that had been removed by the Soviet Union from the alphabet. And of course, it was a Jewish Ukrainian oligarch who financed it. So the idea that there's an Azov movement and the Azon battalion. I had one podcaster have me on his show and he said, "Oh, the Azov, that's most of the units in the Ukrainian army are Azov units." And I said, "No, it's just a regiment. You know how small a regiment is or a battalion is? They have dozens of divisions, which are, there's 9 battalions in a division. What are you talking about? It's the Azov, it's incredible what these people will tell you that it's not the problem of what they think. It's what they believe that just isn't true that's the problem."
I'll do you one better. Okay. As of today, I could not believe this. As of this afternoon, the Russian Ministry of Defense are calling them Ukrainian Wehrmacht militants now. I kid you not. That's what they're called.
There is no such thing. It was destroyed in 1945. Hasn't been a Wehrmacht for what, 80?
82, 80. No, 80 years.
It's 2025. For 80 years, there hasn't been a Wehrmacht. Since 80 years of last May, it's surrendered. Doesn't exist. No such thing.
Yeah.
No SS either.
That's just that's part of the agitation and propaganda. He's just trying to soup people up that he's the good guy fighting against fascism. Because the communists, everybody who opposes them, they accuse of being a fascist. In South Africa, the communists fought under the guise of stopping apartheid against white racism. In Cuba, Nicaragua, everywhere else the communists wage war, they're fighting against fascism. This is why my Cuban friends finally were able to corner some of the communists, say, why do you make the choice between communism or fascism? We don't want fascism, we don't want communism either. And it was the white Americans who were pushing this idea about that Castro was fighting, took over because he was against fascism. So this is the controlling of both sides of the argument. And if you control this, if you create the conditions or the situation and you control both sides of it, you end up controlling the solution. And the solution, it looks like, is total chaos. Bandera was leading the Ukrainians who were fighting against the Soviets and fighting against Hitler. He was accused of being a fascist. I met a Polish guy, Marian Golubiewski. I'm not good on names. He had the numbers on his arms. He was in a Nazi death camp. He fought the Nazis in Poland. He was captured. He was put in a camp, and somehow he got out. He got all across Europe. He got to Spain, and from Spain he was brought to England. In England, he was taught demolition and, like the heavy-duty special warrior type stuff. Then he was parachuted behind Nazi lines and continued the battle. After the war, the Soviets caught him and arrested him and put him in prison, probably because they figured he's a good guerrilla fighter. But they accused him of being a Nazi collaborator, but he had the numbers tattooed on his arms from the death camp he was in. I met the guy. I didn't know his background until afterward. People asked me, "Do you know who he is? Do you know?" I said, no, what? They told me the background. I wish I knew it before I met him. He was a small guy. He had charisma. He was a guy walking down, if you see him walking down the street, you think nothing of him. And yet he was a hero. They could make movies about guys like this. And there's many, many guys like this out there that you see them passing by and you have no idea their background, how important they are, both on the good side and the bad side. So I met that guy. My Polish friends from Solidarity brought me to meet him we had a little get-together in Queens. This was all the way back in the early 90s. I never forgot it. And he was called a Nazi collaborator, because he would have been a threat to the communists. Therefore, they had to brand him a Nazi collaborator. And Bandera, the guy who was one of the leaders of the guerrillas against the Nazis in
let's
Ukraine.
Let's clarify the history of Stepan Bandera, because people don't. It's a rather nuanced. He was a freedom fighter against the Soviet Union for Ukrainian liberty, and he's a very important person for Ukrainian nationalists, people who want an independent and free Ukraine. He was working against the Soviets. And when the Germans invaded Ukraine, as many people know, the Ukrainians came out and put flowers on the German tanks. And in fact, Hitler was shown a movie of this. And according to his valet, Heinz Linge, Hitler was wincing at this because he wanted to exterminate these people. He hated Slavs, including Ukrainians, and he didn't want to see these people as allies. And of course, there were strategists after the war who said the Germans could have won the war if they just united and armed the Ukrainians. They could have won the war. But Stepan Bandera thought when the German army came to Lviv, what is now Lviv, the westernmost large city in Ukraine, the Wehrmacht, Stepan Bandera came up to the German officers and said, "Can we set up a government? Can we set up a free?" And the German army said, "Yeah, why not? Good thing. We don't have to worry about administering this place. You can do it." they started, it was a matter of days before the SS came to town, arrested them all, Stepan Bandera and all the others, and put them in concentration camps, right? Because they didn't want it. And then later when Kiev was taken by the Germans that year, a bunch of Ukrainians came forward to organize a new Ukrainian free government, thinking that the Nazis would support a free Ukraine, like the Germans had done in World War I. And they were all rounded up. And in that case, they executed most of them. The Nazis did. And they put a very brutal governor called, his name is Koch, in charge. And in Hitler's Traitor, a book about Martin Bormann and the Soviet agents in Hitler's inner circle, it speculated, and many Ukrainians have told me this, they thought that Koch was a Stalin agent who was actually running Ukraine to make the Nazis unpopular with the Ukrainians. So there would be a partisan uprising against the Germans. And of course, you had Ukrainian partisans fighting on both sides, fighting against the Soviets, fighting against the Nazis, fighting both, alternating, because both the Nazis and the communists were evil. And that's what we have to understand today. We have to understand that these are both two different factions of the same new religion, socialism.
You had to watch, for research purposes, you had to watch the entire Fuentes and Carlson interview. What was your takeaway from it?
Fuentes was trying very hard to sound like a normie, except that he broke down at this one moment and mentioned that he celebrates Stalin's birthday. I'm a fan, he said. And Carlson, being a complete kook himself, something's wrong with him, something's broken in his moral compass, didn't hammer him, didn't give him any real grief over it, and just let it go by. You're interviewing somebody, you're giving them 17 million listeners, and they say that they're a fan of Stalin and they celebrate his birthday, and you just let it go by and think he's a good guy, he's a reasonable person?
He did just spend that time in Moscow, if you recall, not long ago when he interviewed Putin, and then he went back to interview Lavrov, if you remember.
Yes, and also Dugin, and you will recall what Putin told him, which was maybe the most surprising little tidbit in Putin's interview with Tucker Carlson. Putin said that Hitler was justified in invading Poland in September 1939. Which raised a lot of eyebrows, but you got to remember, Stalin was aligned with Hitler then. Stalin also invaded Poland, only he came in 16 days after Hitler did and took the eastern part of Poland. Well, Hitler took the western part of the country. And of course, Stalin was saying the fault for the war was on the Western Allies. The fault for starting World War II, Stalin said that. The fault was Britain and France for declaring war on Germany for invading Poland. And being a good Stalinist, Putin basically said, yeah, it was the Western Allies' fault. Hitler was justified invading Poland. How about that? How about that? And nobody thought, wait a minute. But see, that's what Putin was openly appealing to the National Socialist underlayment in Germany and to those people in the MAGA movement who are anti-Semites. He was openly appealing to them in that segment of that interview.
Dugin is appealing to the American right today. He's publicly said a few hours ago that Elon Musk dropped the America Party too soon.
Yeah, maybe Elon dodged a bullet there. Look, Eric Voegelin, who lived in Austria before the Anschluss, he was a professor at the University of Vienna. He was a political scientist and philosopher. He asked himself, why do otherwise honest people indulge in the intellectual dishonesty of anti-Semitism and dialectical materialism? Why does Tucker Carlson, for example, tell so many lies about Russia and Ukraine? Putting partisan problems aside, I mean, Voegelin said, look, the partisan issues here are unimportant. It's the philosophical issues having to do with the pursuit of truth. There's something about human beings that our moral imperative is to live in the truth. You know, a lot of practitioners of the therapeutic profession, psychologists say their biggest problem, patients are the patients that lie to themselves and lie to other people and live in the lie. You know, there was the book that came out decades ago, The People of the Lie, written by former leftists, American leftists. And there's something about we are required to live in the truth. Lies are like kryptonite to us, like kryptonite is to Superman. It degrades us. And so we have this God has placed this on us that we have to seek the truth. We have to live in the truth, because if we don't, if we cheat, if we cut corners, we are going to produce a catastrophe like World War II, like the Holocaust, like the gulags in Russia and the Laogai in China. This is what, if you're a human being, you have to stand against the torture, the mass murder, the war. It's not the Jews, it's the new religion, socialism.
I think when you talk about cutting corners, we've been cutting corners since Kissinger and Nixon opened up the door to China, and we've gone into business. You know, yeah. we've gone into business with them. You know, we've reestablished the I guess the new age, new economic policy, if you want to call it that. And now that's all come to an end. You know, all
Hitler
of these.
is a man we can do business with. Mao is a mass murderer, but we can do business with him. So Nixon am going there to China, and we're going to make peace, and we're going to turn China against Russia. How did that work out for us now that China and Russia are united against us, and we've partly disarmed, and Europe is disarmed, and they are way ahead in the rearmament, and we're facing a potential world war where we just get blasted off the map? Do we realize how evil these compromises were? A guy who killed 45 million of his own people, Mao Zedong, in the Cultural Revolution and the Great Leap Forward, starved 45 million of his own people to death and killed them in this Laogai. I mean, how can you justify linking arms with a mass murderer? You must never do that. That's why Winston Churchill was right in saying, look, Neville Chamberlain, I understand why you're appeasing Hitler, but it's a mistake. You have to stand up against him. You can't give him an inch. He's going to take a mile and millions are going to die. Churchill was right.
And Trump.
Let me jump in here.
Yeah, go ahead.
Let me jump in here too. You had World War I, and the beginning of World War I, it was strictly in Europe. The American people got pulled in. They didn't want to go to war. We went to war. It was devastating. A lot of people came home blind, crippled, arms, limbs missing. And then 20 years later, there's another upheaval in Europe. So you had the American people said, no, to hell with them. They could go F themselves, right? 20 years later, we could go fight again. So those people, their sentiments were right, but they didn't understand the danger of the Nazis. The danger would have not been just kept in Europe. It would have been all over the world. The same with the communist threat. Now, the Ukrainian people, they knew Stalin. Stalin wiped out up to 10 million of them. So they know the tragedy of that. Anybody, any lunatic who comes forward fighting the communists can be looked at as liberators. You have to see it from the side of the victims. So the Ukrainians were victims first of the communists. There were Russians too who joined Hitler because they also suffered under communism, and Hitler was supposed to stop communism. This is how good people could be misled or good people could go wrong. They're looking at their reality and what they've experienced. We here are not part of that, so we could see it from afar, like above it, looking down and see the whole situation. And we can't understand why people would grasp this person, why this people would follow this people. Now, I have a communist publication from England. I don't remember the exact wording. I used to talk about it all the time, but I can't remember every single thing I ever learned. So it was something like September 18th. Now, the date could be wrong, okay? It doesn't really matter. September 18th, if that's the right date, will go down in history as a glorious day when the glorious Soviet forces crossed the former Polish border and killed 10,000 Polish officers and gentry. I think that's the Katyn Forest Massacre, but I'm not sure. So that's a communist publication, and the Soviets are bragging how they crossed the border and invaded Poland. And in other parts of that same publication, they talk about the attempt to drive a wedge between German and Soviet friendship. But they basically said it cannot happen, and that the British fleet cannot attack the Nazi fleet, the German fleet, because of Soviet-German friendship. So that's a publication that I have in English. Communist literature is printed in every single language and sent all around the world to all the communist parties. I think what happened was, once Hitler invaded the Soviet Union, the communists probably called back all that literature to be destroyed. They don't want anything in writing where it's openly they're praising their friendship with Hitler. Well, I got it at the headquarters, the American Communist Party. So obviously all of that stuff did not get recalled and destroyed. Now, people like Tucker Carlson, if Tucker Carlson is pro-Nazi in any way, if he saw the documentary, The Soviet Story, same with that guy Fuentes, people could be enlightened with more information, but the problem is who controls the information. Some people only get information from the enemy, not realizing it's the enemy. You have agents of influence who used to be one agent in the government shaping policy or opinions in the government. That's an agent of influence. influence. Now they have agents, mass agents of influence. We have the education system, we have the court system, we have the religions, the culture. Everything is penetrated by the radical left revolutionaries. So right now we got the chaos where they got the so-called right wing being radicalized. We got the left wing that's already here established for over 100 years. And this is the culmination over 100 years of communist activity in America. They fake collapses, they fake splits, they do the weak look a la Sun Tzu, and then they come back stronger. And that's all in communist publications. Every time they do a split or a collapse, they come back stronger. And the communists say they come back stronger. Obviously, they came back stronger because they first faked weakness. This is amazing stuff. Everybody is misplayed. Everybody's outsmarted, it seems like, except us, the few of us who spent a lot of years in this. Most people didn't or won't spend the time we did. And because we're the minority, it looks like we're crazy. Sometimes the truth is crazy.
Yeah, the truth. This is where you have to have a clean conscience. And Voegelin used the term second reality to describe people who no longer live in real reality. And I would say that most people today, just from my observation, live in a second reality in terms of politics. And our media airwaves are filled with false narratives that promote dangerous fantasies, like the fantasy that America is the only superpower, or the idea of Francis Fukuyama that we reach the end of history, or the alleged benefits of a society with open borders. There's also the delusion that we can bring down global temperatures with extortionate taxation and regulation. Look, there have been thinkers in past centuries who believed the truth was worth fighting for. And I'm going to quote one. It is wrong always, everywhere, and for everyone to believe anything upon insufficient evidence. This was said by William Kingdon Clifford in 1876 in a famous lecture before the Metaphysical Society. To make his point, Clifford described a ship owner who was about to send to sea an immigrant ship, and the ship was suspected of being no longer seaworthy. And ignoring the danger to the passengers and crew, he sent it out and it sank mid-ocean, and this guy collected the insurance money. So what shall we say of this ship owner? Did he have a moral obligation to know whether that ship was seaworthy or not? You look at our politicians and you say, how many of them are doing due diligence? I don't think Trump is doing due diligence. That's why I hate him. He has a responsibility more than all of us to know the truth. He lives in a massive lies and misunderstandings, and he does it on purpose. He self-glorifies himself in the midst of all of it. It's very selfish and narcissistic. So I hate him because he's going to get a lot of Americans killed. And I don't care if conservatives, I voted for him 3 times, but I got to admit, I hate him now. I'm watching what he's doing when he's free to do what he wants, when he doesn't have a Pompeo or a Bolton to hold him down. And I'm sorry, but I just object to people wrecking countries, destroying alliances, and enabling their enemies. I don't accept it.
I have a clip of Trump that I would like to play on Laura Ingraham the other night about him bringing in an additional 600,000 Chinese nationals as students and saying, this is what the base wants. This is what MAGA wants. I understand what MAGA wants, and this is what they want. I don't know any person that voted for Trump that says this is a good idea.
I don't
at all. But if you guys will permit me.
I don't either. He must have bad people around him who are helping to sway his opinion. I don't blame Trump for not knowing what we know, because very few people know what we know.
Birds of a feather flock together.
Well, I'm not going to flock together with the enemy who's trying to destroy Trump. I discern who the enemy is and who's misled. I don't just automatically lump people as the enemy because they disagree with what I know. I know what I know because I studied it. Most people don't do the study we do. They rely on the established authorities, the established writers, the established experts.
They've been relying on Trump. And when Trump veers right off the cliff, we can't follow him off that cliff.
Yes, and here you're going to hear him.
We got to work to correct them. We got to work to correct them. But we can't join the chorus of people who are trying to destroy Trump. We can't join with them because then you got the right-left coalition again, and we could be part of it if we don't express it in a better way.
Well, let's hear what he has to say.
Okay.
Folks are not thrilled about this idea of hundreds of thousands of foreign students in the United States. We have about 350,000 Chinese. One point during COVID, you were going to, push to, get them out, but that was pulled back. You've said as many as 600,000 Chinese students could come to the United States. Why, sir, is that a pro-MAGA position when so many American kids want to go to school and there are places not for them and these universities are getting rich off Chinese money?
Sure. Never said about China, but we do have a lot of people coming in from China. We always have. China and other countries. We also have a massive system of colleges and universities. And if we were to cut that in half, which perhaps makes some people happy, you would have half the colleges in the United States go out of business.
So what?
Well, I think that's a big deal.
Are they fans?
You would have the
fans of the United States?
Yeah, but you would have, as you know, historically, black colleges and universities would all be out of business. You would have a system of colleges and universities.
So we're dependent on China to keep our university system going?
But I think it's good to have, I actually think it's good to have outside countries. Look, I want to be able to get along with the world.
They're not the French. They're the Chinese. They spy on us. They steal our intellectual property.
What, do you think the French are better?
Yeah.
I mean, really? I don't know. I'll tell you, I'm not so sure. We've had a lot of problems with the French where we get taxed very unfairly on our technology, where, they put 25% taxes on American products. Look, assuming everyone treats us badly, because that's the way I am, but we take in trillions of dollars from students. The students pay more than double when they come in from most foreign countries. I want to see our school system thrive, but at the same time, I know you and I disagree. We're never going to agree on it, but that's okay. And it's not that I want them, but I view it as a business. We have millions and millions of people. Also, I want to get along with countries if possible. People are shocked. Remember, Hillary Clinton said, we'll be in a war. I stopped 8 wars in the last 9 months. I don't want to be in wars. If I am in a war, we're going to win the thing fast and it'll be violent. But you know what? I don't want to be in wars. But one thing, you don't want to cut half of the people, half of the students from all over the world that are coming into our country, destroy our entire university and college system. I don't want to do that.
I wouldn't lose any.
And don't forget, MAGA was my idea. MAGA was nobody else's idea. I know what MAGA wants better than anybody else. And MAGA wants to see our country thrive.
He doesn't understand ideology.
Our country.
He doesn't understand ideology. He doesn't understand there's a communist movement.
Our universities are anti-American. He's supporting and he's helping to float an anti-American set of institutions with flooding the country with Chinese who are going to attend those institutions and pay to uphold them. That's what he's doing. Look, when lives are at stake, when the person who's responsible for a ship or a nation cannot free himself from guilt by claiming innocence. No real belief, however trifling and fragmentary, is truly insignificant. It prepares us to receive more of the like. He is gaslighting us. This is good for America. That's a lie. And look,
he's wrong. Wait. A lie. Somebody could be wrong. It doesn't mean it's a lie. He's definitely wrong on this. The colleges and universities, look, they're teaching anti-Americanism. So when you bring college students from all over the world in, they're going to be taught anti-American stuff too. Now, there's some crazy belief that the more brains you have from different countries, the more brains that we get here to work and research. The problem is if you teach people from communist China, they're learning our top technology. They're in our top research institutes. Remember, Nixon brought in Soviet scientists into our research lab to monitor that we're not doing biological warfare or anything like that. When people don't understand communism, when they don't understand there's a communist threat, all the problems we have stem from that, not understanding communism. And the fact that very few people understand communism, I don't think they're all the enemy. They just don't understand. Now, the idea that a president should know, I agree a president should know, but how's he going to know?
Let me say something. Trump is claiming he understands MAGA. He created MAGA. It was his idea, so he knows what MAGA wants. And MAGA wants 600,000 students here to support our anti-American universities. That's what he's saying. He knows better than that.
No, I heard what he's saying.
Not that stupid.
I heard what he's saying. He doesn't see.
Look, this is what Clifford wrote. The truth is precious and has to be conserved. And it's an heirloom which every succeeding generation inherits as a precious deposit, a sacred trust to be handed on, not unchanged, but enlarged and purified. An awful privilege, an awful responsibility that we should help to create the world in which posterity will live. And he wrote that any man who pushes away doubts, who cultivates ignorance, is basically impious. And this person is committing a sin against mankind. And certainly Trump is committing a sin against America. I don't give him a break. I do not. He is a responsible man. If he behaves like a monkey, he's done it by choice. That choice goes deeper than just not understanding communism. He doesn't understand anything, and then he lies about the one thing he claims to understand. How can you claim to understand something when you don't? That's called a fraud. If he examines himself for a minute, he knows he doesn't understand. He's just saying it because it serves him. That's fundamentally dishonest, Jimmy. I don't give him a break.
Look, you say you don't give him a break, but if you help start a conservative anti-Trump movement that connected with the communist movement, we destroy our presidency. Instead of trying to enlighten him, instead of trying to enlighten the masses, we can't help the enemy. I'll never do anything that helps the enemy. I'm always careful about that.
There's no saving him. He's beyond help.
Hang on just a second, Jimmy. I have to jump in here and I have to say this. By Trump saying what he just said, plus I have another clip of him talking about bringing in masses, I mean thousands of foreign workers, saying that we don't have any talent within America. We have to bring in foreign workers in order to get this done. I'm sorry, we don't have to destroy Trump. He's doing it himself by what he's saying and taking these stances. He's doing it on his own. I talk to conservative people, just like Jeff, that voted for them 3 times, and they say, we didn't vote for this. What is he doing? It's the same thing when he was doing the anti-NATO rhetoric, and he's threatening to pull us out of our European obligations for helping them with defense. People at that time were saying, what is he doing? We didn't vote for that. We didn't vote to leave NATO. We didn't vote to get out of a defensive alliance.
That got Europe allegedly to start building up their defenses. So that worked, whether he intended it or not, that worked out good. That got Europe worried with the building up the defenses. But everybody's starting with the wrong assumption. It doesn't matter how great your building is built. If you do it in quicksand, it's not going to stand. The assumption everybody has is we defeated communism, okay? So he probably thinks there's lingering stuff. He's now talking about the threat within or the enemy within. He probably doesn't understand the enemy's been here. It's been here over 100 years. Lenin talked about the internationalists in America rising up. So Lenin had connections with the communists here. Very few people study this. The idea that a president should know it simply because he's a president is ridiculous. Why would you assume he should know this?
Because his
when
advisors
nobody studied it.
His advisors.
Because he's the president, and it's his responsibility to know something.
Yes. Well, if it does that, right. Just to put it, worst case scenario, Jimmy. You like to throw worst case scenarios out there. Just to give you an idea, let's just say, for the sake of argument, right now, let's say a disaster happens. Okay, are they going to then claim that they don't know? It's their responsibility to know.
Right.
When they come to arrest,
it's everybody's responsibility to know. He doesn't even know. How would he know to bring as advisors? Who would he bring who understands this stuff? He's not going to bring us. If he brought some of us,
no, we'd fire everybody.
But
a blowhard ignoramus like Trump has one responsibility: to self-assess and to shut up and get out of the way. His MAGA movement sounds good.
Get out of the way.
He's made promises, and now he's breaking them, and he's doing things to destroy the country and to bring discredit on American nationalism, on American patriotism. He has become an icon of that, and he is smearing it with crap, with excrement. I'm sorry.
Because our country's not going to stand. If you help build this anti-Trump movement, which is considered by many people to be the pro-American movement, there are better ways to do this instead of denouncing him. He's crap. He's a liar. He's a traitor.
Terrible war is coming, Jimmy, and we are going to.
I know. And I'm not going to be out in the street with Antifa
promises anymore. We've got to be adults and face the fact. We can't be monkeys anymore and believe in the monkey shine.
Well, gentlemen, for the sake of not going in circles, I think we are at time, so we're going to have to draw down. So we are going to have to do our final thoughts, and then we're going to have to end. So, Jimmy, do you want to give your final thoughts?
My final thought is what it's been all along. I don't think we're going to. I'm going to keep fighting. I've been doing it. I felt like I was the only one until I heard about Jeff, and then Trevor came. But for most of my life, I thought I was the only one, me and my close personal friends, that were trying to stop communism. But now it looks to me like Whether the battle's hopeless or not, I'm going to continue to fight. I'm not going to give up. I'm going to keep fighting, spreading the word. More people have to be educated. I'm not going to join the chorus denouncing MAGA and Trump. I'd rather spend my time denouncing and exposing the enemy and then showing how Trump and others have it wrong because they're starting on wrong assumptions and presumptions. That's the danger. Truth is what we're supposed to know, but how do people discern the truth when you're surrounded with all kind of bullcrap? The truth we know and believe and espouse and talk about, we are the extreme minority. We are a fringe among the conservatives. So that's not our fault, and that's not the other conservatives' fault. It's the whole movement here. But you have the communist movement, you have the globalist movement. When you have all the major foundations working against us, tearing apart, and they're not considered the enemy. They're not considered part of the communist movement. But they collaborate on many levels. They have a broader anti-American perspective that they promote in every way. You have admirals and generals that belong to subversive organizations, the same organizations that promote people like George Soros. You got the UN, you got all these global organizations. It's a huge movement against us. So we're like the few people out there trying to hold back the tidal wave. Other than that, the world's fine. So
yeah, if people want to hear more about the things that you've done, Jimmy, and follow your work, how can they do that? I know you've been doing some stuff with Lee. You just did another one with him the other night.
Yeah, I'm going to do more. It's he lets me talk freely. He leaves me talking. Sometimes I'm not sure if I got cut off. Sometimes I'm talking to friends, and then all of a sudden I realize that we got cut off, and I'm talking a half hour, nobody hearing me. So I'm on I did a lot of interviews with Jeff Nyquist. That's jrnyquist.blog. I do these interviews with you, these great shows we do. Whatever we disagree, we're still on the same side, I believe. And of course, rumble.com. I'm Jimmy from Brooklyn. I'm going to be doing more. And a lot of things I'd love to talk about, but I can't. There's a lot of things I got to be very careful what I say because I have a lot of people that I've been threatened. There was one serious attempt on me a few years ago. I've had car windows broken 1 year, maybe 8 times because of a bumper sticker. So the enemy knows about me. I'm out there in public. I'm trying to be known now because I don't want, if anything happens to me, we know a girl that penetrated the Chinese communist drug operations and she died of an overdose. She wasn't a drug addict. She wasn't a drug user. They got rid of her and she thought of as she died of an overdose. So the enemy could destroy people. I want people to know I would never hurt myself. I would never do anything suicidal or anything like that. But I have been threatened by serious people connected to Moscow, connected to other places, hardline enemy people. Off the air, I would talk to you about it, but I'm not going to say anything more on the air because people are building information on me. I've had several probes personally questioning me about things from strangers who don't know me. That's a little strange.
If we're not going to divulge anymore, we just need to draw a line under that because I don't think you need to give any more personal information. So, but yeah, we all need to look after ourselves because this is one of those times where it does go as you're talking about. Jeff, final thoughts.
Yeah, I object to communism because it's subversive of the truth. It's a lie. I object to Nazism for the same reason. Now I must object to Trump because he's lying. So it's not, I'm just not saying it's all communism is the only lie that's being told out there. I object to all lies. And I will go against whoever is lying because America, and I've said this before, you can't live a lie. You're going to destroy your country. We need the truth. We need to live in the truth and we need to oppose whatever is a lie. If we support something and it turns out to be a lie, we've got to course correct. We've got to go the other way. Now, maybe nobody's going to go with us. And it's not defeatism to now fight against all. Okay. I and a handful of other people are going to fight against all the lies. All right. Well, yeah, they're going to hang us or whatever, put us in jail in the end. But look, I'm not giving up. If you can't run, you walk. If you can't walk, you crawl. And if you can't crawl, you wriggle. And that's the way I see it. Maybe right now I'm just wriggling. And
some people think I lie and you lie, Jeff. Well, so people don't know the truth. It's nice to say they should know the truth, but how many people do? Then there's also wishful thinking. Some people, the truth is horrible. They can't believe it, so they assume you and I have to be lying. We're the only ones saying. Some people would think we're the only ones saying this.
They're committing grave sins for which the punishment is
how could they be committing a sin if they don't know something? That's not a sin to not know something.
Responsibility to know, Jimmy. They're human beings. They're not monkeys.
If there's 3 different opinions out there and 2 of them are right or one of them is right, how do you decide from the 3 of them which one's right? I'm not going to condemn somebody because they don't know which alleged truth is the truth. I'm truthful. You're truthful.
There are 3 kinds of people. Jimmy Hesiod wrote this thousands of years ago. He said there's 3 kinds of people. There's people who can think and lead. There's people who can recognize the people who can think and will follow them. And then there's the people, he called them the useless men, who can't think and won't follow people who do. And we've got a society now where those people think they ought to be leading and they've taken charge. And that is the chaos that comes when you put things in the wrong order. And whether we are able to turn things around, the way the world works, the catastrophe that follows will put things back the other way around eventually, although millions will die in the process. This is history. This is the way history reads.
I don't condemn you that you don't speak French, German, or whatever. People only know things when they study it. When the enemy has control of the means of information, communication, and education, they shape views and opinion. Lenin's a party of a new type. This is the results of that. People can't see what the truth is because they don't study it. They don't know the history that we know.
But it is their duty to study it and to know as human beings.
But they did study it. Some of them did study it, but you got the wrong studies out there. You got the wrong people promoting this and that. Okay. It's hard to figure out. Not for me and you. I've been in it since I was a kid. You've been in it like that.
I'm not going to excuse people who are not doing their due diligence. I'm done doing that. I don't do it. I say,
what if they do their due diligence, but they're being fed the wrong information?
Okay, we've covered this, gentlemen. We're kind of going in circles here, so we are going to have to end. I do apologize, but we're kind of going back over the same stuff over and over again. Yeah. Jeff, if people want to follow your work and support what you do, how can they do that?
jrnyquist.blog and my Amazon page where you can buy my books.
I don't usually give final thoughts because I do a lot of these things during the week. And, the listeners probably get enough of my talking and everything else during the week that I like to have you guys give your final thoughts. But I've been reading something recently, and I told you about it, Jeff. It's this book here. And it was the book that influenced Yukio Mishima's life. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of great stuff in here. And I read one passage in here that applies to these conversations that we have every week. And I wish Trevor were here to hear this, but I'll tell him about it later. But this one passage, when I read this, it made me think of the conversations we have, and it keys on everything that we've talked about here tonight. And it says, there are many who like to impart moral lessons in the world today, but few who choose to listen. Moreover, fewer still are those who actually abide by the precepts. No one ventures to teach morality to a man in his 30s. Without advice, he does as he pleases and continues with his foolish antics and wastes his life in a downward spiral of nefariousness. Be conversant with wise men and seek lessons in morality from them. And that's what I take away from these conversations that we have each week. So to answer your question, Jimmy, are we all on the same side even though we disagree? Yes, we are.
Yeah, definitely.
We're going to have to end it there, gentlemen. Thank you for being here today. Thank you to all the listeners. God bless everyone and have a great evening.